everyone, welcome to my channel. In today's video, I wanted to share with you guys my initial impressions of the ELDRIDGE Sorcery Palette. So I'm very excited about this palette. It is extremely beautiful. Like, look at that gorgeous color story. I've been really into greens lately, and I feel like there haven't been that many new releases that have this sort of color story. And so even though this is not a new release, I've been eyeing this palette for the longest time, and so I am super excited to try this out with you guys. So in today's video, I'll be giving you guys some swatches, demoing this on my lids, and providing my initial review of this palette. So if you're interested in learning more about sorcery, then just stick around. So first off, some context for any of you who have watched some of my recent ELDRIDGE videos. You might be a little bit curious why I decided to pick this up, considering how much bad luck I had with the Myth palette. That's the first eyeshadow palette I picked up from her. This one has more of a purpley magenta color story. This one actually ended up on my list of most disappointing makeup products. I found that these formulas really didn't work for me, other than basically the shimmer formula. And in the comments of that video, it seemed like a lot of you guys also struggled with Myth. And so I bought this a while back when she first launched these palettes. And because I had such a bad time with this, I didn't buy any more of her eyeshadow palettes. But recently I did a big haul of ELDRIDGE products, including several of her liquid eyeshadows and her liquid highlighter. If you guys are curious about those products, definitely check out that video. But since I was on her website anyway, and I kind of wanted to get this bag, which I know is silly, but you know, it was one of those like free gifts if you pay a minimum amount of money. And so because I've been eyeing sorcery for the longest time, and sorcery has gotten really good reviews, I decided I would give it a chance. And indeed, some of you in my comments have said that the formulas in sorcery are different from the ones in Myth, and so I'm very optimistic that hopefully this palette works a lot better for me. So without further ado, let's first get into the packaging. So honestly, part of why I picked this up too is I just love the packaging so much for ELDRIDGE's eyeshadows. This might be one of my all-time favorite packaging styles for eyeshadow. Just look how gorgeous this is. And these are interchangeable shadows, so you can make your own custom palette as well. Inside, we have a medium-sized mirror along with these gorgeous shades. Let me go ahead and give you guys swatches. So first we have Troubadour. This is a seamless matte. Ooh, wow. Okay, that is very pigmented. Wow. Okay, I'm actually really impressed with that shade because I feel like I only pressed in a little bit, but it almost looks like a cream, doesn't it? Like, look how silky smooth that is. Okay, let's just hope this doesn't hard pan. For context, the Myth palette has her velvet matte formula, which I did not like. This kind of reminded me a lot of the OG cream to powder formula from Natasha Denona that was very finicky and often balled up. That's what I got with Myth, but this one is different. It's a seamless matte formula, and definitely upon even just the swatch, this is much creamier, almost kind of has a liquidy look to it, which is really interesting. Let's just hope this actually lasts. So next we have Grotto. This is a metallic, and I'm just pressing in really lightly for these swatches. Ooh, wow, that's super gorgeous as well. Because of the hard pan issue with the other palette, I'm trying not to touch this palette too much because the oils on your fingers can definitely help exacerbate hard pan. But that's super pretty. I mean, these two shades, I think together would be a really nice, just simple green look if you don't want to do anything too fussy. Next, we have Madrigal. This is also a metallic formula. Ooh, that has sort of like a blackened base to it. Wow, super pretty. You can see even though it looks really gold in pan, it does actually have some nice green to it as well. Very high shine too. So this shade I am super excited about. This is called Mercurial. This is a luminous dual chrome. Like, just look at that. Wow, that is very special looking. I think this is the only palette that has this formula from her, and wow, okay. That's gorgeous. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm already very excited just based on these swatches, but look at that. I love how this is not a glitter topper. It looks like it has some base to it, which is great because in Myth there was a glitter topper that had no base and was extremely difficult to use, but this looks absolutely lovely. Then we have Mage. This is a metallic. This seems to be a little bit more of a kind of silvery shade, so very pretty. Less interesting. I think this is probably the least interesting in the palette, but it does actually have a little bit of a sage green element to it. And then finally we have this blue shade, Swan Song. This is also a metallic. So most of the formulas in this palette are going to be that metallic formulation. Ooh, but that is very, very rich. And here's a close-up of all of those. Again, I think this shade over here is the absolute showstopper. So pretty, though this one also has a very unique sparkle to it. I'm super excited to get this on my lids. So bringing you guys closer, let's go ahead and dive in. So I'm going to start out with my Rephr 15 Mini in this Troubadour shade, since I like to have a bit more control the first time I'm trying out any palette. And because this is the only matte shade in this palette, this is one that presumably, unless you're doing a one and done, you will end up using this shade quite a lot. And I have my Pat McGrath Eye Primer on underneath today. And this is actually applying in quite a pigmented manner, as you guys can see. So the real question is going to be, how well does this blend out? When you first apply it, it definitely packs a punch. Ooh, okay, that's really pretty. When I was first looking at Lisa Eldridge's release of her eyeshadow palettes, I picked up Myth because I thought that would be a more approachable color story for me. As much as I like colors, Sorcery seemed a little bit more out there and less what I associate with Lisa Eldridge. But I feel like since then, Sorcery has just been getting such good reviews that I really wanted to try it out. Wow, okay, that's actually really pretty. I like how that's looking. I mean, I maybe brought it in a little bit too far on the inner corner, but wow, that's nice. It's sheared out quite nicely as well, which I think is quite important given that you only have this one shade. So you want to be able to have it build up, but also shear out so you can still get that dimension even in the absence of multiple colors. Now, is this my favorite matte formula? I wouldn't say that per se. I think it is similar to the Velvet mattes in that you do have to be a little bit careful in how you work them out. But I am hopeful that the Seamless matte formula at least won't get that kind of hard pan effect that I got very quickly with her Velvet matte formula. I'd say in general, my experience with Lisa Eldridge makeup is that she has a brilliant eye for colors and for textures, but maybe in part because her brand is newer and smaller, sometimes the longevity of the products is not that great. So for example, I have a ton of her lip products, but some of them have begun to sort of turn on me even though we're not near the expiration date yet. So even though I love her formulas and the colors they come in, I do find that sometimes it's a bit finicky to work with her products. And yeah, I would say this shade is, at least so far, a like, not love for me. Would I go into this palette just for this shade? Probably not, but I am optimistic this will set things up quite nicely for the subsequent shadows. As you guys can see on this side, I feel like it's looking a little bit patchier than I would like, but still pretty. Definitely workable, just not like super easy to use. So we have a lot of shimmers. I'm gonna first go into this one and kind of put it near the edge of where the matte is, since I feel like these are sort of the most similar colors. Ooh, so pretty. Wow, look at that. Yeah, again, if you want a really beautiful monochromatic look, I would just say, you know, put the shade all over the lid, use the matte just to blend it out and soften the edges, and then you would have a really beautiful, quite approachable and easy to do green look. This is quite a sparkly shade, so I would suggest kind of being careful with your application. As you guys can see, I'm basically just going in once and then sort of packing it on and then going in again. You do need to layer it up a bit in order to get opacity because of the flakiness of this shade. But at least so far, I'm not getting fallout, which is great because especially with greens and blues, fallout can often be really disastrous. It does not blend well into the skin. Ooh, okay. That's really, really pretty. Wow. Okay, next let's go into this Mercurial shade. I'm so excited about this one. Actually super curious how well this is gonna apply with a brush. Usually for these sorts of shadows, I would go in with a finger, but again, I'm trying to avoid with Lisa Eldridge putting my finger into the palette too much because of my prior experiences. So I'm just gonna put this on the center and wow, look at that. So, so gorgeous. It really just looks like light on the water reflecting on a green pond. Now this is a light enough shade that I think if you wanted to put another shade on underneath to provide more of a base, this could look really beautiful on top of that. So for example, actually if you went in with this shade all over the lid and then covered it up with Mercurial, I think that would be a really nice way to get a more dimensional effect. But since today is my first time using this palette, I'm trying to sort of put each of the shades separately just so you guys can really see what they look like in their own right. But wow, look at that. Ooh, super, super gorgeous. Alrighty, let's see, what do I want to do next? Maybe I will go actually into this shade because I feel like it blends nicely with this one. And just put this kind of right next to it. So we keep that same sort of silvery effect going, but with more of just a metallic finish. So hopefully you guys can see a little bit of the distinction there. This shade actually goes pretty well with Mercurial, but definitely has a more satin effect, so it's not going to be as shiny. Good for more of an everyday basis. So there we have those two on the lids. And then now let's go into this shade and just put this in the inner thirds. In a lot of the promo pictures, she actually put this all over the lid. Personally, I find this is a little bit better for me as kind of a highlight shade. Ooh, just to provide some additional interest. But if you wanted something that is a much warmer toned look, then putting this all over the lid with some of the greens would be nice. I think one thing that's kind of cool about this palette is even though it's super colorful, I can see different ways you can approach this. You can do something very monochromatic. You can do something kind of cool toned if you stuck to like these shades, and something a little bit more warm toned if you went into those shades. So I can imagine a lot of different types of looks you could do with this. Wow, and this blackened goldish green is super beautiful as well. Wow. All right, so I know I need to also introduce the blue, so let's clean that off again and take just a bit of the blue and put this on the outer portion. Wow, that definitely packs a punch. I'm almost gonna kind of make this more of a winged look. Not quite using it as eyeliner, but sort of giving that effect. Even though this is a metallic, I would say this one is maybe a little bit more smooth in texture than some of the other shades. As a result, you can get that sort of liner effect. And to continue that on the lower lash line as well, I'm gonna use this same brush and just sweep it down there. By the way, this is the 2 mini. I've basically been using this brush for all of the metallics and it's been doing a wonderful job. Definitely for this sort of shade, you want to keep it tight so you don't end up getting too much fallout. Speaking of fallout, I do have a little bit on, so let me actually go in with my concealer brush and try to wipe some of that off before my under eyes look too blue. And then cleaning off that brush again, I'm going into the green shade and using that in the middle part just to transition that blue. And I'm glad that these shimmers actually work on the lower lash line. Sometimes with higher impact shimmers, it's very hard to get them in a small surface area like that. but this is working quite well. And then I'm going into this lightest shade just for the inner thirds, just to brighten up that area a bit. Super, super pretty. Wow. Alrighty, so here we have all the eyeshadows on. I do want to clean up the edges a little bit, so I'm going to go back into that crease brush, the Refer number 15, and try to use this just to kind of blend everything together along the top. Again, not the biggest fan, I would say, of this matte shade. I feel like I do need to put in some elbow grease to really blend it out. But the shimmers are absolutely brilliant. They are so beautiful. No fuss at all. I don't know if you guys can see, but basically I'm struggling a little bit over here, for example, with this matte, where I would like it to be just a bit more opaque there, but let me actually try to go in with my 13 mini into this matte to see if maybe a more targeted application will work. Okay, yeah, that might be better actually. I mean, already the 15 mini is kind of a small brush, but I feel like this sort of more liquidy matte shade does have this tendency to just cling to areas and thus not be as easy to maneuver, and I'm definitely having that issue with this one. And over here, I just feel like it looks a little muddy, which is sad because I feel like the rest of the palette is looking super beautiful. I think actually in the future when I go into this palette, I might combine this with my Retro Glam from Natasha Denona, because that has some really pretty seafoam, green, and khaki matte shades that I think would go really well with these shimmers, and that way I don't have to worry so much about the blend, because the blend on this is definitely leaving much to be desired. But here we have it, the finished eyeshadow look. What do you guys think? And here we have the final look with eyeliner. I'm really loving how these shimmers are looking. They're all so high dimensional and they really work well together in a look, even though this is definitely a more intense look than I would normally go in for. So zooming you guys out, let me give you guys my overall initial impressions about this palette. So on the whole, I am quite pleased with this. It definitely worked a lot better for me than the Myth palette. I will say though, my overall takeaway in terms of Lisa Eldridge formulations is, at least for my preferences and the way I do my makeup, I find her matte formula is just more work than they're worth. So definitely that was the case with the Myth palette. I felt like these were kind of finicky to use. I don't know if you guys can really see in pan, but you know, you can see the texture is a little bit off already. You can see a little bit of the shininess there. I can definitely make these work, and if you guys watched my video featuring this, I can get a decent look out of it. And I feel the same way about Troubadour. I can make it work with quite a bit of elbow grease, but considering just how many mattes I have in my collection, it's not really something that I look forward to. And so I actually pulled out Retro Glam just to show you guys and see how these might compare. So here are the two palettes side by side. So overall color story is definitely very different. What I am curious about though is how this evergreen shade compares to Troubadour. So okay, there's definitely kind of a difference in shade there, but let's just swatch this over here. All right, so yeah, definitely a little bit lighter than Troubadour, but at the same time, I feel like I could probably make it work for any sort of look where I would be going in with Troubadour, because as you guys saw on the face, I feel like it just took quite a lot of work to try to blend out that shade, and so I don't really know that it's worth it. And the one part of the look that I feel like is still not totally coming together is just this outer corner area where the mattes and the shimmers kind of come together. And I just don't want to be constantly fussing with that area. So yeah, in the future, I think I would probably mostly go into this palette for the shimmers. The shimmers are gorgeous. This is true both in this palette and also the one metallic shade that I have in Myth. As you guys can see, they're very dimensional. I think the colors and textures are quite unique. That's what I think Lisa Eldridge really excels at. She always does a great job there. Now, one thing I will mention is I feel like at least this blue one over here, Swan Song, does kind of like get blended away easily. That's the one thing I'm not a huge fan of. I keep applying it over here to try to get that liner look, but every time anything just like lightly touches it, it does tend to just blend off or kind of flake off onto my cheeks. So that's the one thing I'm not a huge fan of over here. Yeah, this whole corner is, I don't know, giving me so much trouble for some reason. But other than that, the shimmers have been great. With the other shades, other than Swan Song, I haven't gotten any fallout that I can see. And that's pretty impressive just given how high shine these formulas are. So on the whole, for me, I would say these shades over here are absolutely amazing, really hit it out of the park in terms of the formulations, the performance. This one is no good for me, and this one's a little finicky to work with. But on the plus side, I do think if you are someone who likes more simple makeup looks, I think these are the shades you would probably go in a lot with anyway. All of these can probably be a really nice one and done shade on the lid if you don't want something like super colorful like I have on today. And really the look I have on today is not one that I would do that often either. I think in the future I would just kind of go into this palette on days when I want one really beautiful greenish shade and just put that all over the lid with some matte from another palette. I would love to hear in the comment section though what you guys think about this palette. If you picked it up, how has it performed for you? Have you figured out ways to make Troubadour and Swan Song perform better on the lids? And if you've tried any of her other palettes as well, please let me know your thoughts. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna stop here when it comes to her eyeshadow palettes because the only other one that interests me from a color story perspective is Vega, but because that one is also a bit matte heavy, I'm done with Lisa Eldridge mattes for now. I can vouch for her liquid eyeshadow formula, so she clearly knows how to do her shimmers well, but yeah, unfortunately the mattes just have not been working well for me, even though I feel like her overall aesthetic is something that is a bit more elegant, that would sort of lend itself towards simpler looks with mattes, but yeah, the formulations are just not doing it for me. So that's it for today's video. If you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you all so much for joining me today, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!